So I'd like to welcome you to the Unmasked Relationship Factor Series. I am AliNICOLE WOW, also known as Majesty, and I am joined once again with my senior star, King Celebrity-preneur Protégé, Tom. It's always great when I have him join me so we can have some very empowering, in-depth conversations. So I'm looking forward to seeing where this conversation is going to go today. Tom, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, we always have very intriguing and mostly candid conversations in terms of how we deliver for empowering others with their relationship dynamics. So definitely looking forward to seeing what comes up during this time. I know that there is one particular topic I do or I would like to address, whether now or at some point during the conversation, and it is really around the area of women that have the ability to disempower men in a certain way when it comes to the financial aspect. And so that's a very overlooked, unseen dynamics that most aren't aware of. So definitely want to touch on that at some point. But before we possibly go there, is there anything you would like to bring up, Tom? Anything you think we need to, to hit on? Anything that needs to be unmasked?
No, I'm gonna let you have it.
You go ahead. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's all on you today.
It's all on me. Oh, okay.
I'm following your lead.
Okay, we'll see about that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the area of women. When I say have the ability to disempower, I want to be clear about this because it does not take responsibility away from the male dynamics by no means. But I do want to bring this up for women who primarily attract men who will either have issues with either finding jobs or keeping jobs, or different things like that, and they find themselves having to be more of the breadwinner or so, or more of the person helping that man out. And typically this is not dealing with men who have not been able to have solid careers and relationships. It's just normally when they get with that particular woman, something tends to happen. And I do want to talk about that. So there's a lot of different dynamics, around this. But before I go in, you got anything you want to say, or you want me to start talking about this and then we just have some more dialogue around it? You got anything for this?
No, let's get it.
Okay, we'll get it then. All right. So I want to address the women for just a moment, in case you have found yourself in situations time after time where you have attracted men who, when you met them, either they had good jobs or they've had a history of having good jobs or so, even if they don't have one at that time. But when you connect with them, all of what was promised or all of what had been a history for them just is not playing out in your experience, and somehow they find themselves either out of work and kind of struggling, and you are kind of picking up, I don't say the slack in the sense, and maybe not, it's just that you have someone who is just having a hard time keeping employment. And so if you find yourself in those situations, I mean, there are many different reasons why this could be happening, but one particular area that's very uncommon, well, I shouldn't say actually it's not uncommon, it's not most known about, that's uncommon in terms of a topic, is that sometimes women can have this strong independent vibration about them that kind of overtakes the energy of where they want to be kind of the dominant force, and not necessarily that it's intentional in terms of they purposely set out to do it. Is just a frequency. And sometimes depending on where the man is during that time, it's hard to buck that current where the woman tends to be the more dominant breadwinner, and the man just can't seem to have the consistency with employment. And it's very interesting. This is a very layered topic, Tom, because also something I want to bring up is that sometimes the women actually can't necessarily help this, because sometimes their fathers have set themselves up in their world with intentions that they don't know about, to want to be seen as the hero, to want to be seen as the man within their daughter's eyes that is the ultimate provider. And so sometimes she'll actually attract men into her experience whom can't seem to be the providers, even though they've been that for probably other people, but not in her case. So this is a very layered topic.
Yeah, and it's another dynamic that nobody else is talking about with this too. A father that's in a woman's life, or that was in a woman's life when she was growing up, but not active.
Oh yeah. We can talk about that too, because that plays a huge part in all of these different things. So definitely we can talk about that, and that plays a part in the finances that too.
Yeah,
It's very deep. And the reason why I want to bring this up, in terms of, I felt compelled to talk about this, especially before we start to kind of conclude and wrap this series up, is because, we've been touching on the unseen dynamics and unmasking some things that aren't commonly talked about. And so sometimes women aren't even aware that this is going on with them. But just as the Bible says, people perish for a lack of knowledge. And so when you don't have the knowledge base around this, regardless of whether it's something that you're giving off that has been set up by parents or however, you still have to be responsible for ultimately the parts that you play, behaviors that you carry out that are possibly being a breakdown within different relationship dynamics. So today I want to provide some awareness, of course, but then also some empowerments to start making the shifts, because I know some women may be thinking, well, if I'm this person, how do I actually start to buck this, so we'll get into talking a little bit about this. But you know what, Tom, before I actually start going kind of down that rabbit hole, so to speak, because it definitely can be one, let's talk about what you brought up, because I think that's very key too, and actually then might provide even a better segue more so into a more expanded conversation around what I wanted to talk about. So go ahead and bring up the topic that you were talking about, and let's see where we can go from there.
Yeah, that's I'm kind of speaking from experience on that one.
Okay, well,
I've been with a woman. I've been with a woman that who had a father in her life, but he wasn't active. And
can you really say he was in her life?
I mean, yeah. Well, yeah, kind of. He would stop by occasionally and visit her and her siblings, but I mean, it wasn't like a they didn't have a bond or nothing. Matter of fact, they didn't start getting closer until after she got grown. And then he would pop up at her house on occasion, and she saw more of him after she got grown than I guess when she was a kid.
Okay, all right. And so how those dynamics play out for her? What type of impact?
Well, seeing that she grew up in in the household with a single mother that was independent, she took on that same mentality.
Characteristics. Okay, yeah.
Same characteristics. And every time I tried to help, she wasn't having it, basically. And then if something was too much for her to handle, or she got tired, then she would try to put it in my hands and try to have me salvage it, or expect me to work a miracle or something.
Or working, yeah, okay, yeah. Where you could have been working along with, during the time. Yeah, it's really interesting. And I'm glad that you actually shared this, because it does play into what I was going to talk about, is sometimes, why women end up being a certain way, or what they give off. A lot
And
of
what
it is- Go ahead, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, what compounded this situation was, I was in a new city. I was in a strange city that I had never been in. And no, she was the only person that I knew there, and I couldn't, it was like I had to start all over from scratch. It wasn't easy for me to find a job. I was down on my luck for a while, longer than I intended, and that it just compounded everything. Then she would start saying things like, "I feel like I'm wearing pants in the family," and then eventually, she would. She ended up telling me she felt like she had more of another son. She said she felt like she was raising a second son with me.
Wow. Yeah. And see, here's the deal. And though that could seem very legit, for sure, in terms of, not minimizing that experience in terms of what she felt might have been going on. But see, when we lack the awareness of the part that we play, then yeah, then there's no really reconciling any type of relationship like that, because the person's not self-aware. And not understanding is that, yes, but at one point when someone was trying to do something, you were bucking up against that, and it sends off a vibration. And you know what? This is hard to explain. It is hard to actually fathom, but this happens in real time. I have seen it, okay, on multiple occasions, where that energy is so strong that even the most alpha male, who has been used to being the man of his, if you call it castle or however, can get with a certain woman whose energy is just like what you're describing, and they can't seem to be able to do their normal thing. And you would think that it's just an action-based type of thing, but it's crazy. Literally, and like I said, I've seen it where men who've been very responsible, men who've been able to take care of things, they get with a certain type of woman, and it's almost like a spell, in a sense, where they, for whatever reason, can't seem to keep a job, can't seem to work, and and they don't even understand what's going on themselves, and then have to listen to a woman talk about, just like what you're describing, and then making the man feel like he's kind of sorry, or he's just, in this predicament, where typically, aside from her, he's never been there before, and probably outside of her experience would never be in that type of scenario,
Right. And then what make this, and the worst parts of this situation was, it's something, that's the kind of thing that you don't tell somebody that you supposedly love, and that's that important in your life.
Yeah, okay, well, I'm gonna play the devil's advocate here just for a moment. I would say yes and no, because now there are sometimes, depending on the dynamics. Now, in your case, I'm sure probably not, for sure. But now I have seen cases where there are men who just plain out are freeloading and this, that. Of course, like I said, that wouldn't be you. But there are times where it is okay for people to actually address their feelings or even frustrations. I do think you have to be careful in terms of how,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, you have to be careful in the delivery, in the delivery of it,
like we
But
talked about last week.
oh, absolutely. That's right. Right. You have to be careful in the delivery of it, but you also have to be aware of your part and your responsibility. Just
Mhm.
like, again, like even some women who are taking care of men, whether they're in marital relationships or just dating or so, is that you have to look at your where you have to be responsible too. What part have you played? Because if you don't look at that and you keep looking at the other person, you're going to miss the huge blessing and the blessing within the mix. And guess what? You'll end up repeating that, because that man can go out of your life and another one can come in and we'll be back in the same song and dance, you know, so to speak. And people don't seem to believe that. But I do know for a fact that when some women are so independent, and there's nothing wrong with being independent, especially in, you know, in this day and age, you know, for sure. Women have been, you know, the last few years have been very independent and rising more in that. And that's a great thing. But it does have to have a balance. And women have to be in a place where they are allowing men to actually participate in the ways that even the man would like to, you know, for him to really feel like he's in his position, you know, so to speak, which I know roles and things get defined and
Yeah, but
redefined.
the other thing,
Go ahead.
yeah, but the other thing I was gonna bring up, you know,
Mhm.
the reason why I said that the worst part of it was, like I said, she was telling me things that you don't tell somebody you love, and then the fact too that, you know, you already know about all of the verbal abuse I took when I was growing up,
Right. Oh, yes. Right.
and,
Right. Right.
and even yeah, and even took some a little bit of it, you know, after I got it to be a legal age. But I mean, yeah,
Yes, damaging.
yeah, I told her all of this, and she basically what she was doing, you know, was, you know, putting me through the pain all over again
Mhm.
that I opened up to her about.
Right. 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 Using that against you.
Right.
Yeah. And again, going back to what was mentioned earlier, is that when someone puts themselves where they're like, oh no, I'm not having it. I'm not going to let a man take care of me in this way. I have to do it this way because I'm this, you know, I'm this type of woman. But then when she gets in a situation and now wants a miracle to be worked, you know, where it can't be at that point, you know, but you've bucked against it so long. But when someone's trying to be there for you, which can be a unique situation, because in some cases, there's some men who actually aren't trying to be, they're just trying to be there for benefits or whatever, you know, whatnot. And they're not trying to help out. But when you have someone who actually is, and then you are bucking away from that until you get into crisis mode, then now all of a sudden you don't want to put the blame where it's supposed to be. You want to deflect and cast it to someone else and then be nasty and abusive in the process. And see, that's the thing I think that most people don't realize, both men and women. But since we are primarily talking about women in these dynamics today, is that women don't realize that sometimes you can say some things, you can do some things that can really set some stuff in motion that you really can't recover from. Because once you injure, especially a man, on certain levels, that is like a tattoo etched in him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. It's, you know, it's branded at that point, and it's really hard to actually come back from that, because they're a different breed of emotional creatures. And so so it's interesting. It is.
Yeah, and then not just that, they mistake that the difficulty in recovering from that as you not forgiving them for saying those things and treating them that way, and for them treating you that way.
Yeah, well, the thing about it is that's why we have to be mindful of what we do, because you know what, we can't, once you do something, you can't take it back. And
No,
though a person can forgive you, it doesn't mean that they forget. It doesn't mean that
you took the words right out my mouth.
yeah, it doesn't mean that they're not going to be a little bit more guarded in terms of what they talk about, what they communicate, and also too how they open up. Yeah, so you do have to be careful. You have to be mindful for sure. Yeah. So you got anything else on that one?
Well, that was basically it. I
Okay.
mean, yeah, that's brutal.
Yeah,
And
it is.
like
Yeah,
I
it is.
said, at that time, as a result of that, I had a couple of physical challenges. Remember, I told you I had a blood pressure, at one time at 180 over 130
Yeah. Whew.
at 26 years old.
Mm.
I could have had a stroke.
Yes, you could have.
Yeah, and
Would
if I
not
would
have
have
been
had a
worth it.
right, and with her telling me all those things and treat me that way, stressing me out, what if I did have that stroke? Then
That'd have been your
uh,
fault too.
right, that would have been, yeah. She really would have had to take care of me then.
Right. Right.
And
And
yeah,
the
that would
abuse
have
would
been
have been the abuse would have been 3 times worse.
right, and she would have found a way to make it my fault.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Wow. Interesting dynamics. I mean, interesting dynamics. Now, I do want to provide some empowerment here because this isn't about, oh, let me point and blame here. It's the women, you really need to watch out for this or that. Well, you do in a lot of cases. But the good news is that we can always make shifts, but you can't make shifts if you aren't self-aware and you aren't ready to be self-responsible. Okay. Because you have to be able to do that. And so, yes, can you get some help for that? Absolutely. But there are things that you can do on your own to empower yourself. And whether it's reading, listening to different resources, following even series like these, just becoming aware. And then, of course, there's the power of prayer, and to be elevated to a level of understanding that here's some things that are going on. You have to know what you need to be dealing with before you can actually deal with it, right, Tom Tom?
Yeah, and it's important. Another thing that's important is being aware of these things before it's too late.
Right. We talked about that last week, didn't we?
Yeah. Yeah, operating in your own time.
Oh, yeah, because you can come awake and aware, but sometimes there's damage that's already been done. And once
Oh
that
yeah.
damage is done, I think I used the example about the Red Sea. It's like, okay, when the waters were parted at one point, it was safe to walk through on dry ground. But when that water closes up, that's it. You can't cross over. And so sometimes that's how it is when you take your time to do things and wake up late, you've missed the bus. You've
Yep.
missed the opportunity. And then sometimes there is this kind of impossible type of experience that happens. And again, that's for lessons. So we don't take things for granted that, sometimes I hate to say it, you jump out the plane without the parachute. And yeah, we just kind of see, well, how's this going to land? But if you jump out in midair and realize, oh snap, well, now we're going to have to just deal with the fallout of that. And people need to be looking at how they conduct themselves in relationships just like that. Before you open up your mouth and start going out off and saying certain things, did you just jump out of the plane without the parachute? Or you had one and it's malfunctioning, and now hey, we're dealing with, this is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You made your bed, now you got to sleep in it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's how they say, you lie down with dogs, you get up with fleas, right? Or, it's the same thing. It's whatever your activity was, if you did not examine yourself, and then once you did, you came around too late. Well, it's too late. for maybe for that situation and that scenario. Doesn't mean
Yeah.
that you can't be forgiven, and doesn't mean that you can't have another chance or another shot with somebody else. But sometimes people have damage. There's been too much damage in relationships a certain way for them to be reconciled. And I know
Yep.
people want to say, well, with God, all things are possible. Yes, that is true. But here's the deal. It depends too on what the will is at that time. So I remember someone saying something, this was not necessarily in relationship or regards to relationships. It was just in general, where they said, well, I believe if I jump off a cliff, you know, God can sprout me wings and I can start to fly. And it's not a question about whether God can, willing in those cases. And again, don't put God to the test. So when some people think that they can just do things and just say, well, the Lord is forgiven and he can repair this, just because he can doesn't mean that he will, and doesn't mean that it is his will once some things have already gone, you know, awry, in a sense. Yeah, it's interesting. So you know, back to the lecture at hand here, in terms of bringing it back around to what I was mentioning about women, you know, having this dominant energy, in a sense of not really allowing the love that wants to be there for them to come in a certain way, because they want to be so, you know, independent, so to speak. And the very thing that they say they desire, they're actually pushing it away. So as I was mentioning before, the good news is that once you become aware of this, then you can start to soften that up and start to say, you know, I'm going to be more allowing. Yes, we have to practice this and lean into it some, absolutely. All right. Rome wasn't built in a day. So this doesn't mean that you make a shift and tomorrow you're different, but you have to start being more aware and making steps, you know, towards that. You agree, Tom Tom?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's pretty much the empowerment, you know, for that. Of course, in order to explore that further, we'd have to do some work around that. But these particular segments are really to bring up the awareness and to bring up the empowerment for you to start, you know, to move forward. But of course, if you want work in those areas, then you can reach out, you know, to us, and that we can explore those opportunities. So Tom Tom, I know we just have a few minutes left, you know, within this particular segment, and I've really enjoyed having you be a part of this series, because we've definitely touched on some, you know, some interesting topics. Do you have anything else that you want to bring up before we start, you know, before we start closing out? Or are you still following my lead here?
Yeah, I'm still following your lead. I'm fresh out unless you bring up something else that could trigger me.
He said he's fresh. He said he's fresh out. So you know what? Before we go, let's shift to the men. You know, really quick, because we spent a lot of time in terms of, you know, women's this, you know, whole scenario, because it is a scenario for sure when it gets to that level of women being that kind of strong-willed. So do you actually have any words of wisdom for men, you know, in that situation? Like if you had to relive that scenario or so, is there something that you wish that you could have gotten out ahead of more, or something that you wish could have prepared you to deal with it better, or after it happened, you know, if there could have been some other source of support or something that you could have done, you know, what would you want to provide for a man who's actually in that situation, who knows, you know, he's a man, he's not sorry, he's not you know, incapable of being a provider and doing the manly things, I suppose.
For starters, I would say put yourself first. Don't put yourself on the back burner. Think the situation all the way through. Make sure it's something you really want to do. And if you feel like you biting off more than you can chew, then it's time for you to step aside.
Time to step aside. Okay.
Yeah, because you save yourself a lot of stress, a lot of heartaches, a lot of physical pain and physical ailments before you get in too deep and end up like I was and carrying burdens that you're too young to carry.
Yeah. Wow. You know what? Another topic that we'll have to address probably at some point too is, age difference in relationships. And
Yeah, we can do that next week.
yes, and how sometimes those play different dynamics. And those relationships can work, for sure. But they're just, it's, kind of interesting, how they play out. But, something I do want to mention in terms of what you were talking about earlier is, do you wish that at some point, even though you were being told, no, I got this, and I don't need help, do you wish that there was a way you could have navigated around that and helped out anyway? And if you could turn back the hands of time, or you could, impart empowerment to some of the men, do you wish that you would have found a way, no, let me go ahead and pay this bill for her anyway, or let me go ahead and do this, let me navigate around that, so that at the end of the day, you're not in that situation, especially if it's someone you were planning to be with anyway. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I wish I would have done things different. And then I found myself, spending all kind of money, trying to show her that I was capable of taking care of us and
so then it got to you having to prove yourself.
Yeah, having
Wow.
to prove myself. I found myself feeling like I had to prove myself, even at some point, cashing in on old stock options that I had, taking loans out against insurance policies.
Wow.
Yeah, I was doing all that just
And
to show.
I bet it still wasn't good enough, was it? At some point, it's still, even when that probably happened, if you found yourself back in the scenario again, you were still under the same ridicule. Well, maybe not, but that's typically how it plays out.
Yeah, for the most part. And then after I ran out of money, then you know how that go.
Oh yeah, it's like it never even happens. Like you never really did anything. Yeah, and like I said, that's
So
typically how that happens.
So I spent over $100,000 trying to prove that that I was capable, of taking care of us, and that still wasn't enough.
Oh no, no. Yeah, so
And that's not an exaggeration either. I did spend six figures, trying to prove that.
Wow. And then now that how things really work, that doing it from that vibration was working against you anyway.
Right,
but that was the scenario, right?
And looking back on it, more than anything, I chalked it up to me not having a male father figure to show me the ropes. I had never been in a relationship before and didn't know how certain dynamics worked, and I was in my 20s.
Right. And then you've got an overall unique situation too, because losing both of your parents at a very young age, so, and then being raised by abusive relatives and things like that, so you've had a very unique situation. So getting into a relationship dynamics and someone actually knowing that and kind of using that against you, that was not going to be a win-win anyway.
Right.
Yeah. So well, wow. Here we are at the end of this, segment here, and so many other different topics, coming up. But certainly we definitely can, find a way to be able to hit on those at another time. So, right, Tom, before we wrap up here, give us one word of empowerment or one phrase, you know, to conclude us for this segment. What you got? What's your parting word for us today?
Well, take care of yourself, handle your business, and you know, think stuff all the way through before you get into it and make decisions. They could have life-altering consequences.
Oh, you said it. Life-altering consequences. Think.
Okay,
before you think.
like the group, to quote the group Heat Wave,
Uh-oh.
a song that they had back in the early 70s. Mind-blowing decisions cause head-on collisions.
Woo! Wow. I remember that. Oh, powerful lyrics there. Yes. Thank you, Tom Tom. Wow. All right. Now we have unmasked some scenarios today, and that right there, I have nothing else. Tom Tom, he said it. That took it. So with that being said, you go away and do exactly what he said, and take that to heart, food for thought for sure. And we thank you for being with us today, and certainly looking forward to bringing more of these types of segments to you soon. Take care and stay blessed.